Hi everyone, this is Joseph Sang. Today we'll be talking about the Reinhardt story. This is a story where our client has been out of the US for 10 years with a green card and needed to come back to the US. The problem is the CBP, US Custom Border Protection Agency, the people at the airport asking you questions, where have you been? They have a policy where if you've been out of the US for over 6 months, typically they'll put you into questioning. If you've been out of the US for over 1 year, they generally presume that you have abandoned your green card. Why? Well, it's a long-standing policy. If you are a lawful permanent resident, if you're a green card holder, you're supposed to be in the US working, living, paying taxes, consuming, spending money, building up the economy. You're supposed to be a resident. Now, this case started like almost all of these entry package cases where we get a phone call. It's a client outside of the country. They're saying, hey, we saw your success story. We want to come back in the country. Problem is, we've been out of the country for X amount of time. Typically, it's 1 year, 2 years, something like that. In this case, it was my client and the girlfriend, and they've been out for 10 years. My first question is, well, what have you been doing? You CBP officers, they're pretty strict and they will want to see a lot of documentation and explanation as to why. If you can't convince me, if you can't convince yourself, if if you don't have a tax return in the US, if you have no home in the US, if you have no bank accounts and you have no driver's license in the US, it is very hard to convince somebody that you are actually a resident in the US and that you haven't abandoned it. So that was my line of questioning. And they didn't have any of that. And that pretty much ended the conversation. It was like, okay, it's really difficult. There's very little that I can help you. But they said, please try to figure something out and let's try. So we went in a little bit deeper. And I asked, well, how did you get your green card? Because sometimes the officer would like to say, well, you got it once, just get it again. And this is when Reinhardt said, oh, I got it through the lottery. I was like, what? You got the green card through the lottery? And yeah, so he's one of the super small percentage of people that won the lottery to get the green card. There's another video about that. You can watch it, but it's tremendously lucky. And I was like, okay, well, that's a good starting point because unlike other people through employment or family, generally you are forewarned when you get the green card and you could be well prepared, and it makes sense that you needed more time than the average green card holder. You won the lottery, so you needed an extra year, 2 years. Okay, well, what happened next, right? Why didn't you come within 2 years or 3 years? Then Reinhardt said, well, I was getting a PhD, so I was finishing my studies, and I couldn't just drop everything and go to the US. I had no job, I had no family there, so finishing my education was very important. I was like, okay, so maybe that lasted a couple more years. And then what, right? After you finish your education, now you got your green card. Why didn't you come to the US then and start your career and your family here? Well, they were going through a divorce, and so right after that, a couple years, there was a divorce that happened and life was very stressful. Okay, and then what happened? And then the family business that for 3 generations was winding down. He wanted to close down everything, do a good transition, and then come to the US to build the bakery. And so he's a bread man, and his whole family has been bread men and women, and they make really good bread, but he can't just abandon everything. Mother and father, they were old. Like, okay, so that lasted another couple years, and finally that ended last year, and finally he's ready to come to the US. In total, it lasted over 10 years between getting the green card and now coming to the US. And so, okay, I think this is a pretty good story. I think we could put it together, and I think you would be able to convince the officer. We had to do a lot of practice runs, help him explain everything. His English wasn't the most fluent. He had a very deep accent, but it was very cute. He's tall, bread man with a PhD, wanting to come to the US to start his bake shop. He had bits and pieces of his plans figured out about opening a shop in Santa Monica, but that was only part one. That was only part one in getting the story, because even if he was able to be interviewed by the officer and everything gets approved, he had no way to get there. You would think that you would just buy an airplane ticket and fly to the US and everything will be fine. But with his green card already expired, without having a proper visa, very few airlines were going to allow him to board. Now, it is a very set policy that if you have an expired 10-year green card, you can still board, but how many airline officials understand that? They're just clerks, they're just checking you in, they have a set standard. They don't know every immigration law in every country. So it was actually tremendously difficult to try to find an airline in Germany that will allowed him to come to the US. At one point, he had to just go to the airport and just go from one airline to another and see who was understanding enough to board him. Finally got the airline ticket, finally boarded the plane, and finally, before the CBP officer, explained everything and then entered the US. He is one of the super lucky ones that have been out of the US for a tremendously amount of time and was able to board a plane and come in and explain everything, and the CBP understands and lets him in. I want to say we're very, very fortunate. We know cases that you've been out for more than 7 months and the CBP officer puts you in a room, questions you, and confiscates the green card. So in this case, he's super lucky. In reality, this is just the way our system is. There might be a better way. Hopefully there can be a better way. Instead of people going on long flights after 10 plus, 14 plus hour international flights, super tired, flying in 2 o'clock in the morning. The officer is sleepy, they're tired, they're just going through their regulation. And when two people are at their worst, trying to understand a complex situation, bad things could happen. And there must be a better way. But until then, right now, the CBP, the immigration officers, they are the last line of defense. They are the immigration officers that are adjudicating these type of cases. They are reviewing. And if you've been out of the country for 6 months or a year, they will question you. And if they don't think your story holds up, they don't see documentation, their policy is to put you in the room, and then either you forfeit the green card or they confiscate it, and then you go before a judge. It is extremely difficult, but that's all the reason why you really want to prepare the case well. If you guys have any questions, would love to talk to you. Feel free to grab coffee with me, Maitri. Let's go over a success story. Let's go over a strategy session. But I'm very happy for Reinhardt, and now the US has better bread because of him. Thank you. Bye-bye.